How are you guys doing? Today is Monday, April 25th, 2022. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite individual profile on Raphae Varane. The elite starting defender for Manchester United and the French national team is turning 29 today, and considering he is one of the best midfielders in the world, even though right now he's still kind of coming back from a few things, I still think that Raphae Varane, once he gets fully back into shape and once he finds his footing in this Manchester United system, I think he's very capable of returning to being one of the best center backs in the world. If you're not familiar with him, he stands at about 6'3", so of course he is incredibly tall. I think that out of all the center backs, I think that he's probably one of the more skilled ones. I just like how calm he is at the position. I mean, he's been the starting defender for teams that have won multiple Champions League, so of course he has the skill to stay there. But he's not, say, aggressive as you would say a Sergio Ramos or an Antonio Rudiger is, but the fact that Raphae Varane can really kind of exist within his own, and not only that, really kind of set the standard, I think that he is definitely a player that, while he is 29, not even 30 yet, can still be recognized as one of the world's premier talents, especially at the defensive position. So, getting into his career, he's originally from Lille, so he would eventually, he's originally from France. He would be brought up within the French youth system. He would officially make his debut to the world on the senior circuit in his age 17 season with Lens. In that season, he would start 22 of the 23 games he played for a Lens team that would end up finishing 19th in the season. He even finished with a couple of goals himself, but after they would end up getting relegated from Ligue 1 down to Ligue 2, Raphae Varane would eventually get picked up by Real Madrid, and he would go on to play with Real Madrid for a good amount of time. He played with them for exactly a decade. His very first season with the Real Madrid club would be his age 18 season in 2011-2012. And of course, within that season, within La Liga, he would start 7 of the 9 games he played for a Real Madrid team that went on to win La Liga specifically. So they would win La Liga in his first season there. In that La Liga season, he would make sure that the team allowed 6 goals in the 9 matches he played. They even had 3 clean sheets. He even played 4 Champions League games in a run that would see Real Madrid go all the way to the Champions League semifinals, and at the semifinals they would end up losing to Bayern Munich, who eventually lost to Chelsea in the penalty on finals. But that would be the very first time that he would make his presence known, especially on the big circuit. And even in his first year, he was able to win a championship or at least win a trophy with Real Madrid. His second season with the club would be Varane's age 19 season in 2012-2013. In that season, he would go on to start 12 of the 15 matches as he got more playing time for a Real Madrid team that would finish as runners-up in La Liga for the year. The only trophy they would win in 2012-2013 was the Supercopa de España, where they would beat Barcelona on aggregates, or I guess on away goal. Or no, they won on away goals. But that would be how the Supercopa de España was won. That would be the trophy they won, as they also ended up as runners-up in the Copa del Rey. They ended up losing in the final 2-1 to Atletico. Also that year, they would end up losing in the Champions League semifinals, as this year they would end up losing to Borussia Dortmund, who would end up losing to Bayern Munich in the final. So, of course, this would be the second year that they would lose just super close. But in that season in La Liga, the team would concede 11 goals in the 15 matches he played, another season in which the defense was doing what it needed to do, as he would make sure the team had 5 clean sheets. However, in the 11 Champions League games he played, the Real Madrid defense would allow 16 goals, as this would be a very tough season for them. But of course, as a teenager, this was Raphae Varane holding his own for an entire Champions League run. His third season with the Real Madrid club would be the season that many people would see him as ready to make that next jump, as between 2013 and 2014, he would actually go on to make his international debut. But in 2014, this would be the season where he played his age 20 season with Real Madrid. In that season, he would start 12 of the 14 games he played in La Liga, where Real Madrid would finish 3rd in the league, the first time they finished as not 1 or 2 since 2004. However, That year in 2013, 2014, they would go on to win the Copa del Rey as he played a couple of games, making sure they at least got a clean sheet for one of the games he played in. That year, they would go on to win the Copa del Rey for the first time since Varane had been on the team. They would go on to beat Barcelona in the final, and then they would go on to win Champions League. This is the first time that Real Madrid would go on to win Champions League since 2002, and that would be the first time that they had won or at least while Raphae Varane was there. They would go all the way to the final where they were able to beat Atletico Madrid, their Madrid rival, once they made it all the way to the end. So, of course, congratulations to them for making it. And that would be the very first time that they would win the Champions League with him there. And Raphae Varane, I guess within his third season at Real Madrid, he will have won. He went on to win La Liga in his first season. He won Copa del Rey in his third season. He won the Supercopa de España in his second season, and he won Champions League in his third season. And of course, following that 2013-2014 season, Raphae Varane and the team would go on to win the Super Cup that year, the UEFA Super Cup. And they went on to win the FIFA Club World Cup in 2014. So, of course, they went on to take those trophies, all of the trophies except for La Liga that year. But that would be a very big year. And considering Raphae Varane was a very big part of that team, I mean, the team would concede 13 goals in the 14 games he played. Even in the Champions League run, which saw them win, he played 7 matches as the team had 3 clean sheets in those games, only allowing 1 goal in the other games. Following that, Raphae Varane would go on to make his France debut in big international competition when he would compete with France in the World Cup in 2014. He would go on to be nominated as one of the best young players as France would end up losing in the quarterfinal to Germany. They made it out of their group stage, beating Honduras and Switzerland, drawing to Ecuador. They beat Nigeria in the round of 16 before they lost 1-0 to Germany, before Germany eventually went on to win the World Cup. But that would be how that tournament ended. That would be his international debut to the world. But following that, he would return to Real Madrid for his 4th season, his age 21 season in 2014-15. In his first season as a full-time starter since being one of the better players on the World Cup team, he would go on to start 21 of the 27 La Liga matchups he played in a season where Real Madrid would go on to finish second. They were runners-up in the league. This would come after they won the FIFA Club World Cup, and they went on to win the UEFA Super Cup over Sevilla, another Spanish team. In addition to finishing as runners-up in La Liga, they would also finish up as runners-up in the Supercopa as they ended up losing to Atletico Madrid that year. They would end up losing in the round of 16 in Copa del Rey, where they were eventually eliminated by Atletico Madrid. So, of course, that's how that season would end. Taking a look at how they would fare going into Champions League following the year in which they won it. This year, they would go to the semifinals. At least they made it to the semifinal round for the 4th year in a row since Varane had been there. They would end up losing to Juventus, as Juventus ended up losing to Barcelona in the final, just to get a sense of how they were performing. So following that season, Raphae Varane would, of course, return to Real Madrid for his 5th season with the team in his age 22 season in 2015-16. So once again, in this season, they would go on to see Raphae Varane start 23 of the 26 matchups he played for a Real Madrid team that would go on to finish as runners-up in La Liga for the 2nd year in a row, the 3rd time in a 4-year span since they had won La Liga when he first got there. So that would be just... this is, of course, within the season in which Barcelona was most definitely killing it. But in addition, we're looking at how he fared specifically within La Liga this year, or within this year, in the 26 matchups he played. He would go on to make sure that the team conceded 22 goals in the 26 matches he played, as the team had 11 clean sheets. 2nd season in a row that he had a double-digit amount of clean sheets as the starting defender. In 2015-16, Real Madrid would go on to finish in the round. They lost in the round of 32 in the Copa del Rey, but they would go on to win Champions League, as in 2015-16. That would be the trophy that they claimed. This would, of course, cement the Galacticos era as their second Champions League title in 3 years is literally insane. But within this bracket, they would go on to beat Atletico 1-1 on penalties in order to win it. and that would be their second title in a 3-year span. And of course, right after that season, they were not done. However, Raphael Varane would follow that season off by competing with France at the Euros for the first time. In 2016, he would go on to, or I guess France would go on to make it through the group stage after they would go on to beat Romania and Albania, draw with Switzerland. They would beat the Republic of Ireland in the round of 16, 2-1. They ended up beating Iceland 5-2 in the quarterfinals to make it to the semis. They would end up beating Germany in the semifinals to get revenge for the World Cup, but then they would end up losing in the final of Euros to Portugal. They ended up losing this one 1-0, and looking at it, the lone goal of looking at how the match would eventually be scored, it would be Eder in the 109th minute. That would put France away, as it wasn't even in regulation time where it happened. But of course, with this, France did not let this loss in the final go in vain. Following this 2016 tournament, Varane would return to Real Madrid for his sixth year with the club in his age 23 season in 2016-17. He went on to start all 23 of the La Liga matchups he played in a season where they had won La Liga, like the league, for the second time in his 6-year stint there. The last time they had won it was his very first year. So, of course, this would be a very big year, as within those 23 games, he would make sure that Real Madrid allowed 18 goals in those 23 games, as he had 8 clean sheets. He would go on to play 3 Copa del Rey games in a stint that would see Real Madrid go all the way to the quarterfinal and lose. Once they made it to the quarterfinal, the team that they ended up losing to was Celta Vigo. Celta Vigo would end up losing to Alaves, and Alaves ended up losing to Barcelona in the final. But outside of that, they would go on to win virtually every other trophy that was offered to them. They would win the UEFA Super Cup against Sevilla again, and they won the FIFA Club World Cup, as they would go on to beat Kashima from Japan. And in 2016-17, they did go on to win the Continental title for the second year in a row, and for the third time in a 4-year stretch. In 2016-17, they would go on to beat Juventus in the final. That was actually the day that I graduated high school. This would be this, of course, I think this was probably the moment where he cemented the Real Madrid historic run, the Galacticos era. But of course, following this 2016-17 Champions League win, that would see Raphael Varane win the trophy for the third time in 4 years, a trophy that is incredibly tough to win. He would come back and return for his 7th season with the Real Madrid club while he was 24. And in that season, he would go on to start all 27 games for a Real Madrid team that would go on to finish 3rd in La Liga. This would be Cristiano Ronaldo's last season. That's kind of how this season would go on to be defined. Within La Liga, he would make sure that the team would concede 25 goals in the 27 matches he played. Yet another season in which he's been able to help hold the Real Madrid defense in line. They would also go on to record 7 clean sheets in those matchups. He went on to play 1 Copa del Rey matchup in a stretch in which they would go on to lose in the quarterfinals of the Copa del Rey again. This time they would end up losing in the quarterfinals to Leganes. And then, not to mention that at the beginning of the year, he would go on to win the Super Cup with Real Madrid, as they ended up beating Manchester United 2-1. They would end up winning the FIFA Club World Cup, as within this final they would end up specifically beating Grêmio in Brazil, and they will go on to win the Supercopa de España within the year, as they ended up beating Barcelona. Their Supercopa de España win was the second time that they had won it since Varane had gotten there. And of course, the extra cherry on top, that is right before we get to the summer, he will go on to win the UEFA Champions League with Real Madrid for the 3rd year in a row and for the 4th time in a 5-year stretch, putting an end to the Galacticos era. And of course, after that, Ronaldo would leave. This would be the last time that Real Madrid had won Champions League. But in 2017-2018, they would go all the way to the final, where they would end up beating Liverpool 3-1 at the very end. So that would be the 3rd time that they had won that trophy, as Gareth Bale would score 2 of the goals there. But that is the last time that Raphael Varane has won the Champions League. Following that season, coming off of a stretch, which, in his 7 years at La Liga, he had won or 7 years with with Real Madrid, he had won La Liga twice. He had won the Copa del España once. He's won the Champions League more times in his first 7 years, and he had won La Liga and simply just Copa de España. He won the Super Copa de España twice as well, and he would go on to the World Cup, compete with France. And if you know the story, you know the story. If you don't, you don't. France goes on to win the 2018 World Cup. So you would add a World Cup onto 4 Champions League trophies, 2 La Liga titles, 2 Copa del Rey titles, and even 2 Super Copa titles. But looking at what happened in this 2018 World Cup in Russia, they would go on to win their group stage matchup versus Australia and Peru. Their only draw of the entire tournament came against Denmark. In the round of 16, he would go on to, I guess not to mention that Varane played every minute of the World Cup, by the way. They would go on to beat Argentina, an incredibly tough team, in knockout stages 4-3. They would beat an incredibly tough Uruguay team 2-0, as Varane would score his only World Cup goal of his career. That was the first of the 2. They would win their semifinal game against a very tough Belgium team that was favored to win the entire thing going in. And then in the final, they would go on to beat Croatia 4-2. And that would be the big World Cup title that they had won, as the last time that France had officially won the World Cup was 1998. So, of course, very big, very insane win for France. And of course, considering Varane played every minute, he was incredible. Like that should just give you a sense of how invaluable he was to this team. The team would go on to concede 5 goals, as they even had 4 clean sheets all the way. And of course, and this was after Varane had won 4 of the last 5 Champions League. So I mean, like at 2018, he would be named to the FIFA Pro 11, as he was named one of the top 2 defensive backs in all of soccer, alongside his teammate, his Real Madrid teammate, Sergio Ramos, just to give a sense. And not to mention that he was also named with other really top French players, especially Kylian Mbappe and N'Golo Kante, to give a sense of where Raphae Varane was just not that long ago in 2018. Following his World Cup win with France, he would come back for his 8th season with Real Madrid, his age 25 season in 2018-19, and the first season post-Ronaldo. He would play over 30 games for the first time in his career. He would start 31 of the 32 La Liga matchups he played in a season where Real Madrid would finish as the 3rd best team in La Liga for the 2nd year in a row. As this year, of course, they were still kind of having to figure out what their scoring would look like after Ronaldo, as Karim Benzema stepped up into that spot. They would end up, at least within those 32 games, he would go on to concede 32 goals, and the team had about 9 clean sheets. He even had 2 goals scored himself on the year. He would play 4 Copa del Rey games in a stretch that would see Real Madrid end up losing in the semifinal. In the semifinals, they ended up losing to Barcelona, as Barcelona would go on to lose in the final to Valencia. In the FIFA Club World Cup, following their Champions League win, they were able to beat Al Ain, as they were officially the runners-up and are coming out of the UAE, and they would go on to lose in the UEFA Super Cup to Atletico Madrid. But the FIFA Club World Cup would still be a trophy for the year. Taking a look at how they fared continentally, they would end up losing in the round of 16 in Champions League. The team that would knock them out would be Ajax. Ajax would make it all the way to the semifinals before they were knocked out by the eventual Champions League runners-up, Tottenham. But that would be how that season came to an end. But even within that Champions League run, he would allow 5 goals, or the team allowed 5 goals in the 4 matches that Varane played. But following that, Varane would return for his 9th season with the Real Madrid club in his age 26 season in 2019-2020. And if you're not familiar with the season, the end of this season had to get delayed for about 3-4 months as all of sports was stopped because of COVID. Within his age 26 season, he started all 32 of the games he played in a season in which Real Madrid would win the La Liga title in just the 2nd year after Ronaldo had left. This is the 3rd time that they had won it, considering the first time they won was the first year he had gotten there. And this would be the last time that, but this is not the last time, this is the last time that he would win the La Liga, of course, with Real Madrid. And even to this date is the last time that they have officially won it. If they haven't won La Liga officially with that Barca loss yesterday. But regardless, he would go on to start all those games. He even scored 3 goals himself. He scored the most goals that he ever put together in a season. Also, within that season, the team would go on to win the Supercopa de España this year. They would go all the way to the final as they would end up beating Atletico Madrid off of penalty kicks. But that would be yet another trophy in the case. They would end up losing in the quarterfinals of Copa del Rey, and then in the Champions League, they would end up losing in the round of 16, as the Champions League, as the round of 16 was the only round in which people were actually allowed to play their 2 legs. In the round of 16, Real Madrid would end up losing to Manchester City. Manchester City lost in the quarterfinals to Lyon, and Lyon would lose to the eventual champions, Bayern Munich, in the semifinal. But that is how Real Madrid's Champions League run would end in 2019-2020. And then, of course, they were supposed to play the Euros following that year, but then it would be postponed due to COVID. And this would transition into Varane's 10th and final season with the Real Madrid Football Club. This is the last full season that he has logged to date, as he went on to start all 31 of the games he played for a Real Madrid team that would finish up as runners-up in La Liga. Surprisingly, after a career in which he's won a trophy in every single year that he had been there, this is the one year that he didn't. They would finish as runners-up in La Liga. Specifically in La Liga that season, he would make sure that the team would concede 23 goals in the 31 matches he played. The team's 14 clean sheets would be the most that they would record in a full season, in a full La Liga season, with Varane at the helm. Taking a look at how he fared within the Copa de España, they would end up losing in the round of 32. Then this the second time they lost in the round of 32 since he had been there. They would go on to lose in the semifinal of the Supercopa de España. They were knocked out by Athletic Bilbao, and then following that, they would end up losing in the semifinals of Champions League. The team that would eventually knock them out would be Chelsea, as Chelsea went on to win the thing as they won 1-0 over Manchester City in the final. That would be Varane's last season with the team, and following his 10 years there, he decided that he would go and join Manchester United. But before joining Man U, he would compete with France at the 2022, or I guess at the 2021 Euros that was supposed to be for 2020. They would end up winning. The only game that they won was a group stage matchup against Germany. They ended up drawing with Hungary and Portugal in the other group stage matchups. Once they made it to the round of 16, they would end up losing on penalties to Switzerland, as Italy ended up winning the 2020 Euros. But that should give you that was the last time that he has competed in an international competition, at least big like that. But he will be ready for the World Cup next year, as France is set to take the stage in Qatar, as they have Denmark, Tunisia, and they still have to wait for their third team within their group. But of course, I digress. Following that 2021 round of 16 exit from Euros, Raphae Varane would go on to start his career for Manchester United, playing his very first season in the Premier League, specifically this year. And this was, of course, making it the same offseason in which Ronaldo and Jadon Sancho were moved. So it was really kind of part of a big summer. Within his first season with Real Madrid, I mean, he's kind of dealing with a good amount. So far, he's started 17 of the 19 games that he's played for a Man United team that is currently sitting 6th in the Premier League. They're still possibly eligible for a Champions League spot this next year, as they may have to go through a year of Europa League from what it looks like at this point. Manchester United has had a little bit of, just a little bit of a shaky start to the season, but that's what you expect when you have a whole new roster and you have a whole new game plan. You don't expect these things to really kind of click overnight. But I do think that once Raphae Varane gets his feet under him, he can most definitely help whip this Manchester United team back into shape. In the 19 games he's played, the team has allowed 17 goals, so less goals than matches played. He even played 5 matches in a season in which Manchester United would eventually get knocked out of group stage. No, they didn't. They got knocked out by Atletico Madrid, as Atletico Madrid would be the team to punch them out. They would get punched out in the round of 16 as they lost on a 2-1 aggregate. That's the last time he sniffed the Champions League. But of course, that leads us to where we are right now, as we do not know how Manchester United City's going to end, how their season's going to end. I don't think that he's going to leave the team if the team doesn't make Champions League, but I imagine that once Raphae Varane, I think that once he really gets a sense for what's going on around him, I think that he can help this team return to a championship state that he's seen in France, that he's seen at Real Madrid, success that he's seen with Ronaldo. With that said, I want to thank everyone for listening to all 25 minutes of this piece. I do want to wish Raphae Varane a happy 29th birthday. If you ever get a chance to watch him, I would. He's one of the better defenders in soccer. And it's like, yes, as of right now, his consistency, people would probably point to his consistency. I'd even look at it and say that even in the games that he's played, even with all of the, I guess with everything going on at Manchester United, all the dysfunction, I think Varane is a sign. I think Varane is definitely someone that you need in that locker room. And if they do turn it around, I think Varane will be a big part of the reason that they turn it around. If you ever get a chance, please watch Raphae Varane. He wears number 19 for Manchester United, and he wears number 4 for France, playing for one of the best national teams as well. But he is still playing as one of the best in the midst of his prime, and he's not even 30 yet. Thanks for listening. I hope all is well. Once all of today's exhibitions and matchups are done, I'm going to come back tomorrow on Tuesday, April 26th. And of course, with that said, I do want to thank everyone for listening. I do hope all is well. Hopefully, I'll catch you all with a profile next year for Raphae Varane because he's that good. And then I will follow this up as I do have a profile for Aaron Judge tomorrow. Thanks for listening once again. I probably talk too much, and I'll talk to you more tomorrow. Peace out.